What's up? It's Mike, and have you ever been in this situation before?
I wanna play fake real sports, but not on my Wii.
No?
You ever just give up?
I'm more of a give down guy myself.
Nintendo can be quite the fickle company. They can try and compete with traditional game systems and fail, go the complete opposite direction and massively succeed, then they can somehow do both and sell about the same amount of units as the population of Illinois, and then they can do that again and sell more copies than the population of Illinois in 10 months.
If I was a betting man, I'd just quit.
Over the years, Nintendo has seen some of the most severe ups and downs in the entire games industry. I mean, sure, sometimes Xbox and Sony shit the bed, but none of them also sold the Virtual Boy. One of the biggest ups in Nintendo's history came with the Wii, a system synonymous with polite men breaking into random people's houses to play Wii Sports. Speaking of that Wii Sports game, Wii Sports was the perfect title to pair with the Wii, both as a pack-in title and just in general. It perfectly conveyed what the Wii would soon become known for, which is simple, easy fun that anyone can understand.
So what the hell are you doing here?
This identity would permeate throughout the console's entire lifespan, with another example being Super Smash Bros. Brawl, a game made much more approachable than hand-painting the video game. You could argue if this perception was a good thing in the long term for Nintendo or not, but what most can't argue about is that it absolutely printed money.
Oh, big whoop, anyone can do that.
Wii Sports was the catalyst for all of this, and its sequel, Wii Sports Resort, took everything that game did to the next level. More games, more modes, a completely new revision of the Wii Remote featuring more accurate controls and a gyroscope, and all of that leading to crazy sales numbers. The Wii Sports series cemented itself as a best-selling series, but there was just one looming issue on the future for the series, and that was the Wii itself. The Wii was outdated the second it launched, due to it essentially just being a GameCube 2, and the technology needed updating. So when the successor to the Wii was announced in the form of the Wii U, most expected that to be the end of the Wii Sports series. Turns out most only wished it ended. The Wii U was doing its best to catch up to the prior generation of consoles, with the inclusion of HD gaming hoping to sway at least one person to just for the love of God buy a Wii U. Another thing Nintendo needed desperate help in was kickstarting its online gaming capabilities, with one only needing to look at the aforementioned brawls online to see that they needed help.
That's fairly subtle.
They needed a game that could not only work great as an online title, but also a game that could help kickstart some digital game sales off their eShop, and they decided the perfect candidate for that would be Smash Bros. For Wii U. Only after they tried Wii Sports Club though.
And as with most on his first attempts, this game fucking blows.
With all of the great experiences that the Wii U had in its library, you don't hear Wii Sports Club mentioned very much. Or at all. Why that's the case is fairly easy to determine, seeing as this game is just a confusing, hollow mess, devoid of any of the charms or style that the prior entries in the series had.
Nintendo, always looking out for us, decided to make buying the game as convoluted and stupid as possible. What nice guys.
I'm gonna take a shot in the dark and say that when most people buy a game, they want something complete that only takes one purchase to get. So Wii Sports Club said, fuck you.
But they did only digitally punch you in the face, not physically.
Physically, the story of Wii Sports Club is relatively clean, with just one installment of Jesus Christ. You too can own disappointment completely on disc. Digitally, however, is a whole different ballgame. Nintendo could have just did what they did for the retail release and release everything at once, but they just absolutely had to get bowling and tennis out the door. This game just reeks of being held at gunpoint. They released all 5 sports from the original game out in waves, with bowling and tennis first arriving in November 2013, followed up by golf in December 2013.
Why was golf released by itself? I don't know, ask God.
It then took them 7 whole months to figure out what the fuck a baseball was, along with how to make boxing as terrible as possible, but we'll get to that. This might sound like the stupidest possible way to release a game, but don't worry, it only gets stupider. So let's say you have an absolutely burning passion to play Wii Sports Club, but the thought of actually owning it makes you want to hurl.
Just play Wii Sports.
Or you can buy a day pass for the low price of $1.99. You too can know what it's like to waste $1.99.
Gee, I always wondered.
The idea of a day pass is kind of baffling to me. I mean, $1.99 to play all of the sports on hand for 24 hours is a decent value if you just need something quick to play with your friends for an evening. In any other context though, I just think it's kind of stupid. You know how earlier I talked about them releasing different sports in waves with some being paired up?
Let me guess. They didn't sell them like that.
They didn't sell them like that.
I'll buy a lottery ticket.
How they actually sold them makes way less sense, with tennis, bowling, and golf all being sold separately for $10, but then baseball and boxing combined are also worth $10?
Everyone knows baseball and boxing isn't worth the same as golf.
You're spending a lot of time complaining about this game's digital release when there's a perfectly fine physical release right here, I hear you saying. You try having self-worth after spending $80 on this.
It's really hard.
So Wii Sports Club doesn't have the best first impression, but maybe the rest of the game will turn it around. After putting in the disc and booting it up for the first time, it had to install an update. That's okay, this has never been a bad sign before in the past, so it shouldn't be an issue. It took 10 minutes to download!
The second first impression really isn't selling me here.
After around another 5 minutes to install, we're finally in-game, and I need a Wiimote to progress. Now this is understandable, but I wonder how the gamepad factors into all of this. Surely it'll have a purpose.
Unless you really like baseball.
First thing on the docket is choosing a club, and I decided on the North Dakota Club because they probably could use some new members. Then we get to the menu, and God, it just looks so cheap. How does a game from 2006 have a cleaner presentation than this?
Because back then they cared.
That's not even half of it. When you actually load into a game, why does this look worse than the Wii game? I'm not sure if my eyes are failing, but this game across the board just looks way duller compared to its predecessor. And I can't even say the textures or anything look that much better. Some of that can be attributed to the fact that Wii Sports Club is only running at 720p here, which is only marginally better than the 480p Wii release. But this game wasn't necessarily meant to be an HD remaster of the original game. Its main focus was adding online, so let's see how that is.
So we have a tiny problem.
In terms of online functionality, this game is an extremely expensive paperweight. To literally no one's surprise, no one is playing Wii Sports Club 9 years after its release, and I don't expect that number to improve. But that's not the only online features in the game, it also has Miiverse integration.
So the entire point of Wii Sports Club was for Nintendo to show off its network capabilities. And just 9 years later, none of the online features work or are being used.
And that's essentially Wii Sports Club in a nutshell. All of the games themselves are pretty much unchanged from the original. Tennis has some power shot kind of stuff. Bowling is the exact same, but with the inclusion of the 100 pin mode that makes a return from resort, which is kind of nice. Baseball is actively worse to play, and they managed to completely ruin boxing.
Not boxing!
See, most thought it was impossible to fuck up boxing. Sure, the nunchuck and the Wiimote control scheme from the first game didn't work so hot, but it worked! And then Nintendo realized that made too much sense. When picking up boxing, you have the option to play with either one hand and one Wii remote, or two hands holding two different Wii remotes. But why? How does this remaster of a Wii game not support the nunchuck at all? It's not like the Wii U couldn't support it. In fact, here's a few of the games that supported it. Yeah, that's right, even Star Fox Zero supported it.
That's 1 point to Star Fox Zero. Something no one should ever have to say.
This two Wii Remote boxing bullshit just seems like a clunky solution to a problem that was already solved. And boxing with only one hand just looks and feels stupid. Which perfectly segues into the controls for the rest of the sports, which are also somehow bad.
I'm impressed. In the worst possible way.
How does this game feel so bad to play? Bowling has the random curves from the first game in the series rear its ugly head. Trying to aim a shot in tennis is way harder than it should be. Baseball feels wonky, and in boxing I just randomly lean to the side even though I'm not moving at all. And then I'm not talking about golf, but I'm sure they fucked it up there too.
Wii Sports Club is a disaster on almost every front. From its digital distribution to the presentation to the controls to the focus on online features, all of it combined to make one of the worst first-party experiences from Nintendo that I've ever played. So naturally it got a sequel.
When Nintendo Switch Sports was first announced in February of 2022, most people either went,
"Oh yay,"
or,
"Oh yeah."
It looked very different compared to any of the games in the series before, with a whole lot less Mii's and a whole lot more this.
Now there were a ton of people that weren't a fan of this. Me, on the other hand, I was completely indifferent.
I do understand the importance that Mii's had during the Wii era, but as time went on with the Wii U and the Switch, Mii's were pushed further and further away from the limelight. So when these new avatars were shown for Nintendo Switch Sports, I can't say I was falling out of my chair from shock. Upon first look, I just thought they looked fine, but honestly I warmed up to them fairly quickly. I think they ended up being a great evolution of the original Mii concept in terms of their cartoony but also more realistic looking nature. The presentation across the game is lovely to say the least. From the new environment to the menus to the little details in the game, everything looks great on the TV. emphasis on TV. This game doesn't support handheld mode at all. Now yes, on a very surface level, this makes sense, due to the emphasis on the Joy-Con motion controls. But Nintendo has proven that they are willing to re-release actual Wii games with button controls if motion isn't your thing. And while Nintendo Switch Sports is technically a brand new game, it's still heavily based on the style of an original Wii game. So I don't think it would be too much of a stretch to ask for at least the option to use button controls on any of the sports.
They got Skyward Sword, sorta, working with just button controls. They have no excuse.
Also, just don't buy this if you're a Switch Lite owner, unless you really want to part with $80 and still not have a good time. Speaking of $80, Nintendo Switch Sports cost a whole 50 doubloons for the physical version, and while the digital version only costs 40, it doesn't come with the leg strap, and I absolutely needed a second one for use on the weekends. I mention this because this game only really has one big problem with it.
Well, for one, I don't have any doubloons.
And two, for the amount of content on offer, this price tag is just too high. Nintendo has developed an unhealthy habit recently of releasing games that obviously aren't complete and promising free updates later down the line, which is code for buy our game and maybe you'll get a complete one later, you cheap bitch. After affecting the various Mario Sports titles with this practice, it came over to Nintendo Switch Sports as well, but I think this game got hit the hardest. For one, at least as of the day I'm talking about this, there's only 6 sports on offer, which for the people keeping track at home is only one more than the original Wii Sports. If they were 6 original games, then it would have been a bit better, but only 3 of them are new and the rest come from Wii Sports and Resort.
Did we as a species really need a 4th different way to play Wii Sports bowling?
They even completely kicked golf from the roster at launch, which even for a guy who thinks golf is stupid, I think the fact it isn't there is even stupider. I know I've been a tiny bit negative so far, so let's be a little bit more positive. Even though you can play through everything this game has to offer in about an hour, most of the games on offer here are actually pretty fun.
Except soccer, so let's start with that.
Have you ever wanted to play Rocket League, but it's way more boring? That's essentially soccer. You have a giant ball and similar-ish physics to that of Rocket League, just minus any of the crazy aerial tricks or anything fun whatsoever. Your options include 1v1, which just sucks, and 4v4, which sucks slightly less. The big issue here is the pace. It's just far too slow to be enjoyable, but it does have the benefit of being the only game that supports the leg strap, so it's the best leg strap sport available. Next up is the returning bowling, and this is actually really fun.
What's next? Is Burger King gonna have edible food?
Something about the motion controls with the Joy-Con just feel perfect. For the first time, I feel like I have 100% control over where the ball goes. It's a breeze, and it makes it feel so much more satisfying as a result. You can also pull off some nasty curves, and even though the lack of the 100-pin mode is kinda sad, this is miles away the best bowling that the Wii Sports series has to offer.
And then there's tennis.
Tennis isn't necessarily bad here, it just didn't get that much better compared to bowling.
It's still tennis, which is unfortunate because I was really looking for some false advertising.
So you've seen tennis, but what if you wanted to play tennis and actually have fun? Then badminton is for you, and this is my favorite new sport on offer.
I'm so sorry to all 3 of the volleyball fans out there, but I gotta appease the badminton fan.
I really appreciate the 1v1 nature of it, seeing as tennis forces you to play doubles. And not only does it feel a lot more intense and skill-based, you also have the option of pressing a button to perform different shots.
A brand new innovation that tennis seriously couldn't use at all.
The last new sport to join the fray is volleyball, and this one also turned out to be way more fun than I expected. The entire name of the game is timing, and as someone who sleeps with Bowser's Inside Story tucked under my pillow every night, you'd be right to guess that I'm a fairly big fan of games that require good timing. The only thing that knocks volleyball down a bit is that it can get a little repetitive, but other than that, I was pleasantly surprised. Something that didn't surprise me was the return of sword fighting, or as Wii Sports refers to it, Chambara. I think I pronounced that right. Compared to the other games, the amount of settings is staggering, with the ability to pick between 3 different styles of swords.
Okay, for options in a Wii Sports game, that's a lot.
None of them change up the gameplay too much, but that plus the great controls this time around makes it the best iteration of sword fighting, even if it's a lot less spammy compared to the original. And that's about it when it comes to what Nintendo Switch Sports provides. All of the sports are playable online and they all worked pretty well in the matches that I had, with Bowling Battle Royale being the highlight. There's also a bonus tennis minigame during the credit sequence that I wish was an actual mode for the tennis game, but that's besides the point. The music also bangs.
It somehow manages to have more game than me, both figuratively and literally.
My only issue with the online is that all you really get out of it are some cosmetics that you can get for your character.
And that's all $50 gets you nowadays. A like strap and a fun but definitely not complete video game. I know I'm a part of the problem by purchasing these kinds of Nintendo releases, but come on, where else am I gonna get a Mario Golf Super Rush themed drink coaster?